His eyes swept over her dismissively as she entered the Pentagon briefing room. "This is no place for you," he smirked, authority dripping from every word. The room of decorated military officers chuckled in agreement. She absorbed the mockery in silence, watching as he outlined his flawed extraction plan with unearned confidence. When she finally spoke, it was just 5 words, a classified call sign known only to the highest echelons of military intelligence. The color drained from his face instantly. Sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one nobody sees coming. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If you enjoy stories about underestimated heroes and powerful moments of truth, consider subscribing for more content like this. The screens in the Pentagon's Crisis Response Center glowed with ominous purpose, casting blue-white light across the grim faces of America's top military strategists. Satellite imagery of a suspected terrorist compound in Yemen flickered on the main display as Colonel Thaddeus Blackwood commanded the room with practiced authority. Based on SIGINT from the past 48 hours, we believe all 3 American aid workers are being held in this eastern wing, Blackwood said, using a laser pointer to circle a section of the compound. His voice carried the confident resonance of a man accustomed to being the final word in any conversation. The hostage-takers have made no formal demands, suggesting this is likely a leverage play rather than an ideological statement. The doors at the back of the briefing room opened quietly. A woman in civilian clothes, tailored charcoal pantsuit, sensible shoes, hair pulled back in a simple knot, slipped in and took the only remaining seat at the far end of the conference table. Her entrance drew several curious glances, but little more. Blackwood continued without acknowledging her. "I'm proposing a halo insertion at 0200 local time. SEAL Team 4 can approach from this ridgeline, maintaining cover until they reach the perimeter." "Colonel," interrupted General Hargrove, nodding toward the newcomer, "I believe our DIA liaison has arrived." Blackwood's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly as he turned. "The DIA insisted on sending an analyst. I'm sure your academic perspective is valuable in faculty lounges, Ms. Dr. Oren." Her voice was soft but carried unexpected clarity, her accent difficult to place, neither distinctly American nor foreign. "As I was saying before Dr. Oren's arrival," Blackwood continued with a thin smile that never reached his eyes, "this operation requires battlefield experience, not theoretical models." Lysithea Oren made no reaction to the slight. She simply opened her tablet and began taking notes, her expression unreadable as she studied the satellite imagery now being projected onto the main screen. Blackwood turned back to the display with an air of dismissal. "Once our teams breach the compound, we'll have approximately 12 minutes to locate and extract all 3 hostages before local militia reinforcements arrive. Thermal imaging suggests minimal guard presence during these early morning hours." Throughout the next hour, Lysithea observed in silence, occasionally making notes on her tablet as Blackwood outlined an aggressive extraction plan. Each time another officer raised concerns about local tribal dynamics or potential diplomatic complications, Blackwood would glance pointedly at Lysithea. "Perhaps Dr. Oren can explain the cultural nuances after we extract what's left of our people," he remarked during one such exchange, drawing subdued chuckles from several officers. Lieutenant Marquez, one of the younger officers present, ventured a question. "Colonel, our intelligence on the compound's interior layout is limited. How confident are we about the hostage's exact location?" "We have reliable HUMINT from assets in the region," Blackwood replied, the edge in his voice suggesting he found the question irritating. "This isn't my first extraction, Lieutenant." Lysithea's eyes flickered briefly to the satellite imagery, then back to her notes. When Deputy Secretary Walden asked directly about alternative approaches, Blackwood's response was immediate and dismissive. "With all due respect, sir, I've been in these regions. You can't negotiate with these people. They respond only to force and decisive action." Lysithea's eyes narrowed slightly, the first visible reaction she'd shown since entering the room. "What about diplomatic channels?" Walden persisted. "State has contacts in the regional government who might provide leverage." "Sir, every hour we delay puts our people at greater risk," Blackwood countered. "These groups understand one language, and it isn't diplomacy." Walden nodded reluctantly, deferring to Blackwood's apparent expertise. No one noticed Lysithea's fingers tightening almost imperceptibly around her pen. As morning stretched into afternoon, fresh satellite imagery revealed movement at the compound. Officers hunched forward in their chairs, tension visibly mounting as Blackwood directed a technician to enhance specific sections of the footage. Those vehicles arriving, they're changing the security posture, noted Lieutenant Rivera, pointing to the screen. Sir, if we could consider approaching from the south instead. Lieutenant Rivera, I appreciate your enthusiasm, Blackwood cut him off, but I've led 17 extraction operations in similar environments. The northern approach provides the only viable cover for our insertion teams. Lysithea studied the new imagery intently, her expression thoughtful as the door opened again. Admiral Zephyr Naxos entered, his weathered face scanning the room as officers straightened in their chairs. The Admiral nodded acknowledgments until his gaze fell on Lysithea. Something flickered across his features, recognition, perhaps surprise, before his professional mask returned. Admiral, Blackwood said, clearly pleased to have a senior officer present as he showcased his plan. We were just finalizing the tactical approach. Halo insertion, 2 teams, North Ridge extraction route. Proceed, Colonel, Naxos said, taking a seat with a clear view of both Blackwood and Lysithea. Blackwood expanded his presentation with renewed confidence, detailing night vision parameters and extraction zones before turning deliberately toward the far end of the table. Dr. Oren, I assume the theoretical risk assessment meets with your academic approval? The room went quiet. It was the first time Blackwood had directly addressed her in nearly 2 hours. Lysithea looked up from her tablet. The building layout suggests tunnel systems not accounted for in your plan, Colonel. Blackwood's smile was cold. Based on what expertise exactly? Experience, she said simply. Forgive me if I don't consider library research experience, Doctor. Without rising, Lysithea indicated specific shadow patterns on the satellite imagery. Those ventilation systems match compounds in Kandahar province. Your approach from the north will trigger perimeter sensors buried approximately 30 meters from the main structure. Several officers exchanged glances, some looking more carefully at the imagery, others watching Blackwood for his reaction. Interesting theory, Blackwood said, his tone suggesting it was anything but. Perhaps in your academic papers you can explore these hypothetical scenarios. Meanwhile, we'll focus on operational realities. Admiral Naxos watched the exchange with increasing interest, his eyes moving between them. With respect, Colonel, Lysithea continued, her voice still calm, the pattern of shadow distribution indicates subterranean development consistent with tunnel systems I've documented in similar compounds. Blackwood's condescension turned to visible irritation. This is no place for you. You're wasting valuable time we don't have. Sir, ventured Captain Hernandez hesitantly, should we at least consider the possibility of tunnel systems, if they exist? If I wanted architectural speculation, Captain, I would have invited someone from the Corps of Engineers, Blackwood snapped. We proceed as planned. Admiral Naxos shifted slightly in his chair, his gaze now fixed on Lysithea. The subtle change in his posture did not go unnoticed by the more observant officers in the room. Lysithea maintained her composed demeanor, though something had changed in her eyes. A sharpness, a focus that hadn't been visible before. When you've actually been in combat zones rather than conference rooms, Blackwood continued, his voice hardening, your opinion might matter. Until then, I suggest Operation Obsidian Crescent 2017. The words, spoken quietly but clearly, cut through the room like a blade. Blackwood froze mid-sentence, his mouth still partially open as Lysithea stood slowly. The atmosphere in the room shifted imperceptibly, like air pressure dropping before a storm. Sierra Outpost, Helmand Province, she continued, her demeanor subtly transformed. The meek analyst was gone, replaced by something else entirely. Call sign, Wraith. Dead silence fell across the room. Several officers exchanged confused glances, but those with the highest security clearances had visibly paled. Admiral Naxos straightened in his chair, watching intently. That operation is classified beyond this room's clearance, Blackwood finally managed, his voice stripped of its earlier authority. Yes, Lysithea agreed, it is. With measured steps, she walked to the main console, entered a complex authorization code that made even the senior technical officer raise his eyebrows. The screens flickered, security protocols visibly processing her credentials before classified files appeared. Operation details mentioning Wraith as the lead operative who single-handedly extracted 14 hostages after the primary team was compromised. You weren't there, Blackwood stammered, visibly shaken, his composure cracking for the first time. Lysithea removed her jacket deliberately, revealing a distinctive scar that traced from her wrist to her elbow, jagged, surgical in places, unmistakably the result of severe trauma. The tunnel system collapsed. I carried Ambassador Rennick's daughter 3 miles with this arm fractured in 2 places. Her voice remained calm, factual. The same tunnel system your satellite analyst is missing in these images. The room had transformed from a tactical briefing to something else entirely. A reckoning. Admiral Naxos stood, his chair scraping against the floor in the silence. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe formal introductions are overdue. Dr. Lysithea Oren served as the head of our Special Activities Division's GHOST program before transitioning to analysis. She has more field experience in these regions than anyone in this building. Several officers inhaled sharply. The GHOST program was itself classified, a specialized unit that officially didn't exist, comprised of operatives who could move through hostile environments undetected, gathering intelligence that conventional military units couldn't access. Wraith is a team designation, Blackwood attempted weakly, not an individual. That's what we wanted people to believe, Admiral Naxos confirmed. Makes it harder for adversaries to track patterns when they're looking for a squad instead of a person. The collective realization spread across the room. The quiet woman they had been dismissing for hours was the legendary operator Wraith, thought by many to be a myth or a code name for an entire tactical team. Lieutenant Rivera stared at Lysithea with undisguised awe. Captain Hernandez straightened in his chair, a gesture almost like instinctive respect. Even General Hargrove seemed to reassess the woman standing before them. I wasn't informed. Blackwood's face had gone from pale to ashen. Because you didn't need to know, Lysithea said simply. Until now. Admiral Naxos gestured to the screens. Dr. Oren wasn't sent by the DIA to observe your planning, Colonel. She was sent by me to evaluate it, and based on what I've witnessed today, her assessment matches my growing concerns about your command judgment. Blackwood's eyes darted between them, the full implications of his situation becoming painfully clear. Now, Lysithea said, turning to the satellite imagery and zooming in on specific sections, let me show you what you're actually dealing with. Lysithea's fingers moved with practiced precision across the digital display, enlarging sections of the compound that Blackwood had dismissed as irrelevant. The room watched in tense silence as classified satellite overlays appeared, revealing thermal signatures that had been missed in the previous analysis. These heat blooms indicate advanced ventilation systems, she explained, her voice now carrying a quiet authority that commanded attention. The compound has at least 3 sublevels, consistent with designs we encountered throughout the Helmand province during Operation Kingfisher. Lieutenant Rivera leaned forward. But our intel suggested this was a simple compound, repurposed by the hostage-takers. Your intel is incomplete, Lysithea replied without accusation. This facility was originally built by Soviet engineers in the 1980s. The current occupants are likely unaware of its full design themselves. She brought up a 3-dimensional rendering that appeared to have been constructed from memory rather than official blueprints. The primary tunnel system will run east to west, with escape routes positioned here, here, and here. Her finger marked points that aligned perfectly with anomalies in the satellite imagery. Admiral Naxos nodded slowly. And your assessment of Colonel Blackwood's northern approach? A tactical error that would trigger perimeter defenses and likely result in casualty rates exceeding 60%. Her clinical delivery made the statement all the more devastating. The hostages would almost certainly be executed before extraction teams reached the holding area. Blackwood had regained some composure, though his face remained ashen. These assessments are speculative, without current ground reconnaissance. I conducted ground reconnaissance of this exact facility in 2018, Lysithea interrupted, bringing up another classified file with a security clearance level that made several officers exchange glances. Operation Marble Crown. The regional warlord using this compound now was a mid-level asset during that operation. The file showed surveillance photographs of Lysithea, nearly unrecognizable in local dress, meeting with tribal leaders in what was clearly the same compound they were now targeting. Sheikh Nasser al-Fahim, Lysithea continued, displaying the photograph of a severe-looking man in his 50s. He provided intelligence on Russian arms movements for 3 years. He's not ideologically aligned with the hostage-takers. He's being coerced. Blackwood's expression hardened. That assessment contradicts everything our current intelligence suggests. Your intelligence is filtering through tribal rivalries and deliberate misinformation, Lysithea replied evenly. Al-Fahim lost family to extremist violence. He harbors no sympathy for these groups. Admiral Naxos studied the file details. You maintained contact after Marble Crown? I did. Unofficial channels, but reliable. His oldest son is studying engineering at MIT. The extremists are threatening both his family here and his reputation in the region. The room had transformed. Where Blackwood had once commanded authority, attention now centered entirely on Lysithea. Years of operational expertise, previously hidden behind her quiet demeanor, were now unmistakable in her every gesture and assessment. Dr. Oren, General Hargrove said, addressing her with new respect, what approach would you recommend? Lysithea brought up the thermal imagery again. A smaller team. 2 operators, maximum. Entry through the southeastern drainage system, which bypasses all electronic surveillance. Al-Fahim can be leveraged to create a diversion, drawing security forces away from the hostages. 2 operators? Captain Hernandez sounded incredulous. Against unknown hostile numbers? Speed and precision, not force, Lysithea replied. The hostage-takers are expecting a traditional military response. They'll be prepared for helicopter insertions, teams rappelling from rooftops, standard breach protocols. They won't be expecting a ghost infiltration. The term hung in the air. Ghost infiltration was a technique developed by the most elite special operations units, moving through hostile territory undetected, leaving no evidence, creating no disturbance until the moment of extraction. Who would lead such an operation? General Hargrove asked, though the answer seemed obvious to everyone in the room. Before Lysithea could respond, Blackwood interjected, a desperate attempt to reassert control. This approach is reckless. Minimal force in hostile territory violates every extraction protocol we've established. It's precisely those protocols that have become predictable, Admiral Naxos countered. Our adversaries study our playbooks, Colonel. They prepare for our standard responses. With respect, Admiral, Blackwood insisted. Dr. Oren may have field experience, but that was years ago. Things have changed on the ground. Lysithea regarded him with something approaching pity. 3 months ago, I extracted a CIA asset from Damascus using the same methodology I'm proposing now. 36 hours in hostile territory, no detection, no casualties. The revelation silenced the room again. Several officers glanced at Admiral Naxos for confirmation. Operation Stillwater, the Admiral confirmed quietly. Classified above top secret. The asset provided intelligence that prevented 3 terrorist attacks on European soil. Blackwood stared at Lysithea, comprehension finally dawning. You never left the field. Analysis is my current primary role, Lysithea acknowledged, but certain operations require specific skill sets. Lieutenant Rivera couldn't contain his curiosity. The Ghost program, it's still active? That's classified, Admiral Naxos interjected smoothly. What matters now is extracting our people safely. Lysithea returned to the tactical display. I've already initiated contact through secure channels. Al-Fahim will confirm the hostage's condition within the hour. Once verified, I'll prepare for insertion. I'll lead the operation, Blackwood declared, a final attempt to salvage his authority. Admiral Naxos shook his head. No, Colonel. Dr. Oren will handle this personally, with one operator of her choosing. He turned to Lysithea. Who do you need? Lieutenant Rivera, she answered without hesitation. All eyes turned to the young officer who had earlier been silenced by Blackwood. He straightened in surprise. Ma'am? Your file indicates advanced training in non-traditional infiltration techniques. You also speak the regional dialect fluently, without American inflection, Lysithea explained. You questioned the northern approach despite knowing it might antagonize your superior. That suggests both tactical awareness and moral courage. Rivera nodded, a mix of pride and apprehension crossing his features. I'm honored, but you have concerns, Lysithea acknowledged. Good. Overconfidence gets operators killed. We'll address them during briefing. Admiral Naxos stood. It's settled then. Colonel Blackwood, you'll transition to a support role effective immediately. Dr. Oren has operational command. Blackwood's jaw worked silently, his career imploding before his eyes. Sir, I must formally protest this decision. My experience... has led you to develop dangerous blind spots, the Admiral finished firmly. Your after-action reports have shown increasing casualties over your last 5 operations. You've become predictable, Colonel. That's a liability in our line of work. The rebuke was delivered without anger, but with a finality that brooked no further argument. Blackwood glanced around the room, finding no allies among officers who had been deferential just hours earlier. Dismissed, Colonel, Admiral Naxos said quietly. Report to General Hargrove's office at 0800 tomorrow to discuss your new assignment. As Blackwood gathered his materials, rigid with suppressed fury, the Admiral addressed the remaining officers. Everything discussed in this room remains classified at the highest level. Lieutenant Rivera, you'll report directly to Dr. Oren for briefing in 30 minutes. The meeting disbanded with a new sense of purpose. As officers filed out, several nodded respectfully to Lysithea, the earlier dismissiveness replaced by something approaching reverence. Admiral Naxos remained behind with Lysithea as the room cleared. When they were alone, his formal demeanor softened slightly. You should have told me you were coming back, he said. I would have prepared the ground better. The evaluation needed to be authentic, Lysithea replied, organizing her notes. If Blackwood had known who I was, he would have modified his approach. And instead he revealed every flaw I've been concerned about, Naxos acknowledged. His overconfidence has become dangerous. It's not just overconfidence, Lysithea observed. It's institutional arrogance. He represents a systemic problem, valuing rank and traditional credentials over adaptability and ground truth. Naxos sighed. That's why I need you back permanently, not just for operations, but to help reshape our approach. Lysithea looked up, surprised. I was clear about my terms when I agreed to this evaluation. 1 assessment, 1 operation if necessary. And yet here you are, already planning an extraction, Naxos pointed out with the faintest smile. Some part of you never left this world, Lysithea. She didn't deny it. There are 3 American aid workers who need extraction. That's the priority now. And after? Naxos pressed. The Secretary has authorized me to offer you full autonomy. Build your own team, select your own operations, no bureaucratic interference. You know why I stepped back, Lysithea said quietly. After Kabul. Naxos nodded solemnly. I know, but things have changed. We've learned from those mistakes, and frankly, we need you. The threats are evolving faster than our traditional response mechanisms. Before Lysithea could respond, her secure phone buzzed. She checked it, her expression focused. Al-Fahim has made contact. The hostages are alive, condition stable. He's confirmed my suspicions. The hostage takers are using his son as leverage. So it's personal for him, Naxos observed. That makes him both valuable and potentially volatile. He'll cooperate, Lysithea assured him. I know what motivates him. She gathered her materials efficiently. I need to brief Rivera and prepare gear for infiltration. We insert at 0200 local time. That's less than 18 hours, Naxos noted. Are you certain you don't need more preparation? Lysithea's expression suggested the question hardly deserved an answer. Every hour increases risk to the hostages. Besides, I've had contingency plans for this compound since I last operated there. Of course she had. Naxos couldn't help but smile at the characteristic thoroughness. The Wraith I remember never left anything to chance. Chance is just another variable to be managed, she replied, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. As they walked toward the door, Naxos asked the question that had been troubling him since her arrival. Why did you agree to come back for this evaluation? You turned down 6 previous requests. Lysithea paused, considering her answer. I saw the casualty reports from Blackwood's last operation. 3 operators lost, objective only partially achieved. It was preventable. So this is about saving lives. It always was, she said simply. They parted in the corridor, Naxos toward his office, Lysithea toward the secure briefing rooms where Lieutenant Rivera waited. As she walked, her posture had subtly transformed, the unassuming analyst completely gone, replaced by the operative that enemies had feared and allies had relied upon for years. The Pentagon staff who passed her in the hallways noticed the change. Those with sufficient clearance levels straightened unconsciously, recognizing what they were seeing. Wraith was back in the field. Lysithea found Lieutenant Rivera waiting in the small briefing room, his expression a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. He stood immediately as she entered. "At ease, Lieutenant," she said, setting down her tablet and secure phone. "We have limited time, so I'll be direct. What questions do you have before we begin operational planning?" Rivera hesitated only briefly. "Ma'am, your reputation, or I guess Wraith's reputation, is legendary among special operations groups, but those stories always described a team, not an individual." "Deliberate misinformation," Lysithea confirmed. "Easier to move undetected when adversaries are looking for multiple operators rather than a single individual. The Ghost program was designed around that principle from the beginning." "And the program is still active?" "In a modified capacity," she replied, bringing up secure files on the briefing room's display. "Now, regarding tonight's operation, your file indicates extensive training in subsurface infiltration techniques." "Yes, ma'am. I qualified top of my class at the Advanced Reconnaissance course, specialized in low-visibility entry tactics." Lysithea nodded approvingly. "Good. You'll need those skills. The drainage system we'll be using has 3 choke points and potentially 2 surveillance zones." She displayed the compound schematic, highlighting their planned route. "We insert here, at the southeastern perimeter. 2 kilometers of approach through rocky terrain provides natural cover from observation posts. The drainage tunnel extends 400 meters beneath the compound before reaching this junction." Rivera studied the layout. "This tunnel system is extensive. How confident are we in this mapping?" "I mapped it personally," she replied matter-of-factly. "During Operation Marble Crown, I spent 6 days documenting the entire substructure while conducting negotiations above ground." The lieutenant's eyes widened slightly. 6 days of covert mapping while simultaneously conducting diplomatic engagement? "Multitasking is essential in our line of work," she said with the faintest hint of a smile. "The plans are accurate as of 3 years ago. We should anticipate some modifications, particularly around these security checkpoints." For the next hour, they reviewed equipment requirements, communication protocols, and extraction contingencies. Rivera absorbed the information with impressive speed, asking insightful questions that confirmed Lysithea's assessment of his capabilities. "One final question, ma'am," he said as they concluded the briefing. "Colonel Blackwood has been leading these operations for years. What made you so certain his approach would fail?" Lysithea regarded him thoughtfully. "Experience, Lieutenant. Not just in combat operations, but in understanding human psychology. Blackwood sees warfare as a chess game with predictable moves and counter-moves. But irregular combat isn't chess, it's poker, where psychology and adaptability matter more than force positioning." She stood, signaling the end of the briefing. "Prepare your gear. We depart at 2100 hours." As Rivera left to prepare, Admiral Naxos entered with a secure folder. "Final authorization signed by the Secretary," he said, placing it before her. "You have full operational discretion." "Thank you, Admiral." Naxos studied her face. "How's Rivera? Up to the task?" "He'll perform admirably," she confirmed. "Good instincts, quick learner, no ego interference, rare combination in junior officers these days." "Unlike Blackwood," Naxos observed grimly. "He's already filed a formal protest with the Secretary's office." "Expected," Lysithea replied, unsurprised. Men like Blackwood can't accept that their experience has become a liability rather than an asset. "The Secretary will reject his protest," Naxos assured her. "Your operational record speaks for itself." Lysithea nodded absently, already mentally preparing for the mission ahead. "Admiral, if this extraction succeeds, I'd like to discuss the future of the Ghost program. It needs restructuring." "I thought you weren't staying," he remarked with a knowing smile. "I'm not," she confirmed. "But I can consult on the rebuild. The next generation needs better preparation than we had." "I'll arrange it," he promised. "For now, focus on bringing our people home." Night had fallen over the Pentagon by the time final preparations were complete. Lysithea changed into nondescript tactical gear in the preparation room, her movements efficient and practiced. The equipment she selected was minimal: lightweight night vision, specialized infiltration tools, a single sidearm with suppressor, communications gear small enough to be concealed in her ear canal. Lieutenant Rivera arrived similarly equipped, his expression now focused and calm. Gone was the deferential junior officer. In his place stood a composed special operator ready for deployment. "Transport is ready," he reported. "Stealth insertion craft will put us 30 kilometers from the target. Local assets have arranged ground transportation to the infiltration point." "Good," Lysithea acknowledged, checking her secure phone one final time. "Al-Fahim has confirmed the diversion at 0100 local time. We'll have approximately 15 minutes to reach the hostages while security forces are drawn to the western perimeter." As they moved toward the transport bay, they passed Colonel Blackwood in the corridor. His expression hardened at the sight of them, bitterness evident in every line of his face. "Dr. Oren," he said stiffly, military courtesy barely masking his resentment. "Lieutenant." Lysithea acknowledged him with a professional nod. "Colonel?" "I hope your unconventional approach justifies the risk," he said, unable to completely suppress his skepticism. "The greatest risk would be continuing to use tactics our adversaries have learned to counter," she replied evenly. "Sometimes adaptation requires us to challenge our own assumptions." She continued past him without further comment, Rivera following close behind. Blackwood watched them go, his expression unreadable. "He still doesn't understand, does he?" Rivera asked quietly when they were out of earshot. "Men like Blackwood rarely do," Lysithea replied. "They mistake experience for expertise, never realizing that experience becomes dangerous when it calcifies into rigid thinking." The transport bay contained a single unmarked helicopter, its special operations pilot already running pre-flight checks. Admiral Naxos waited beside it. "Extraction team is on standby at Al Anad Air Base," he informed them. "They'll deploy on your signal once you've secured the hostages." "Understood," Lysithea confirmed. "We'll maintain communications blackout until the objective is secured." The Admiral nodded. "Good hunting, Wraith." She accepted the sentiment with a slight incline of her head before boarding the helicopter, Rivera close behind. Within minutes they were airborne, the Pentagon falling away beneath them as they began the first leg of their journey to Yemen. 12 hours later, under the cover of darkness, Lysithea and Rivera approached the compound's perimeter. They had traveled the final 2 kilometers on foot, moving silently across the rocky terrain. The compound loomed ahead, its walls periodically illuminated by security spotlights. "Diversion begins in 12 minutes, Rivera whispered, checking his specialized watch. Lysithea nodded, studying the drainage tunnel entrance through her night vision device. "Security pattern unchanged from intelligence assessment. 2 guards, 15-minute rotation." They waited in perfect stillness as the guards completed their patrol before moving to the western section of the perimeter. The moment they disappeared from view, Lysithea moved forward with fluid efficiency, Rivera following her lead. The drainage grate yielded easily to her specialized tools. Within 30 seconds they had slipped inside and resealed the entrance, leaving no evidence of their passage. The tunnel was narrow and damp, requiring them to move in a crouch. Lysithea led the way with practiced ease, navigating the darkness as if she had traversed this path countless times before. "First choke point ahead," she whispered, indicating a narrow section where the tunnel constricted. "Possible surveillance point." Rivera acknowledged with a hand signal. They proceeded with extreme caution, using specialized equipment to detect any monitoring devices. Finding none, they continued deeper into the compound's substructure. 400 meters in, they reached the junction Lysithea had identified during the briefing. From this point, 3 separate tunnels branched outward. "Eastern Passage," she directed, selecting the route that would bring them directly beneath the hostage-holding area. As they progressed, a distant explosion sounded from the western perimeter. Al-Fahim's diversion had begun on schedule. "Security forces responding," Rivera confirmed, listening to the radio chatter through his specialized receiver. "All units directed to the western gate." They increased their pace slightly, taking advantage of the distraction above. When they reached the access point beneath the hostage room, Lysithea paused, pressing a small device against the ceiling. The thermal imaging display showed 3 distinct human heat signatures in the room above, plus 1 guard positioned near the door. "Hostages confirmed," she whispered. "Positions match intelligence. 1 guard only." Rivera nodded, preparing the specialized equipment they would use to breach the floor. The cutting tool made almost no sound as it carved through the concrete, creating an opening just large enough for them to pass through. Lysithea went first, emerging silently into the dimly lit room. The guard had his back to her, attention drawn to the commotion at the western perimeter. Before he could turn, she had neutralized him with a precision strike, catching his unconscious form before it hit the ground. Rivera emerged behind her, immediately moving to the hostages. 3 aid workers, bound but apparently unharmed, stared at their rescuers with a mixture of disbelief and desperate hope. United States Special Operations, Lysithea assured them quietly, cutting their restraints. We're here to extract you. Follow our instructions precisely. Within minutes, all 3 hostages were prepared for extraction. Lysithea established a secure communication channel, transmitting their status to the extraction team waiting at the designated coordinates. Extraction team, this is Wraith. Package secured. Proceeding to extraction point Alpha. Copy, Wraith. Inbound, ETA 12 minutes. Rather than returning through the tunnels, which would be slow going with the hostages, Lysithea led the group toward a service corridor she had identified during her previous operation at the compound. The diversionary action at the western perimeter continued to draw attention, allowing them to move through the eastern section undetected. When they reached the extraction point, a clearing just beyond the compound's eastern wall, Lysithea positioned the group in defensive formation while Rivera established a perimeter. The sound of helicopter rotors grew steadily louder as the extraction team approached. As the helicopter touched down, Lysithea efficiently loaded the hostages, ensuring Rivera boarded before taking one final survey of their surroundings. Satisfied they had left no evidence of their method of infiltration, she climbed aboard, and the helicopter lifted off immediately. Extraction complete, she reported over the secure channel. All packages secure, no casualties. The return journey was conducted in professional silence. The rescued aid workers, still processing their sudden freedom, rested under medical supervision while Lysithea and Rivera prepared their preliminary report. When they landed at Al Anad Air Base, Admiral Naxos was waiting. His expression conveyed both relief and pride as the hostages were transferred to medical personnel. Clean operation, he acknowledged. Exactly as you planned it. Lysithea nodded, the accumulated fatigue of the mission beginning to show only now that the objective had been accomplished. Lieutenant Rivera performed exceptionally, she noted. His infiltration skills were crucial to our success. Rivera, standing nearby, straightened at the unexpected praise. I'll note that in my report, Naxos assured her. The secretary is already being briefed on the successful extraction. No casualties, no detection, no international incident, exactly the outcome we needed. And Colonel Blackwood? Lysithea asked. Reassigned to the training division, effective immediately, Naxos confirmed. His experience will be valuable there, without the risk to operational personnel. 2 days later, news screens throughout the Pentagon displayed reports of the successful extraction of all hostages with no casualties. The official statement credited collaborative intelligence efforts and diplomatic channels, with no mention of specific personnel. Lysithea walked the Pentagon corridor alone, still unassuming in appearance, her practical shoes making little sound on the polished floor. Junior officers who had previously ignored her now stood straighter as she passed, exchanging glances that mixed awe with embarrassment. Admiral Naxos caught up with her near the eastern exit. The secretary wants you for permanent tactical oversight, he said without preamble. Your assessment of Blackwood was right 3 months ago. I should have acted sooner. Lysithea smiled faintly. I didn't come back for recognition. No, Naxos agreed. You never did. That's precisely why you deserve it. He extended his hand. The task force needs leadership that understands the difference between experience and expertise. I'll consider it, she said, accepting the handshake. As Lysithea exited the Pentagon, the afternoon sun caught her face, revealing briefly the weight of experiences that had forged her into something extraordinary. She climbed into an ordinary sedan, nothing about her suggesting the capabilities she possessed or the lives she had saved. On her dashboard sat a framed photograph. Lysithea surrounded by a team of young women in military fatigues, their faces determined, their postures reflecting her own quiet confidence. The next generation of operatives who, like her, would move through the world unseen until the moment their presence became undeniable. As she drove away from the imposing structure, leaving behind the chaos and politics of command, a sense of purpose settled around her. Not all heroes sought the spotlight. Some preferred the shadows, where the real work happened, where judgment, rather than ego, determined success or failure. The most dangerous people in any room were rarely those who demanded attention, but those who had earned the luxury of not needing it.